Hi, it's Katrina. Missing Stonehenge chunk. Turns out that a missing chunk of Stonehenge that was taken as a souvenir has helped to solve a long-standing mystery of where the stones originally came from. A workman named Robert Phillips was part of a team that helped to re-erect Stonehenge in the 1950s. One of the standing stones was fractured, so they drilled through it in 3 places to strengthen it with metal rods. Robert kept one of the drilled cores and returned it in 2019 for his 90th birthday. Now known as the Phillips core, it measures about 1 inch in diameter and is about 42 inches long. A small part of another core was found in a nearby museum. The other ones are assumed to be lost. But with just those cylinders, researchers were able to reanalyze them, solving an age-old mystery about where the Stonehenge stones were quarried from. Until the study was done, little was known about these sandstone boulders, or sarsens, which were placed there starting as far back as 4,500 years ago. The tallest among them measure as much as 30 feet tall and weigh over 25 tons. After intensive X-ray fluorescence spectrometry and chemical signatures and all kinds of stuff involving modern technology, it turns out that nearly all the monument's massive stones came from Westwoods in Wiltshire, which is about 15 miles from the site. Many of the smaller blue stones, on the other hand, were sourced from over 140 miles away in the Preseli Hills of Western Wales. Thanks to the man's decision to return the property to the English government, scientists can now say where the stones come from and are hoping to use LiDAR to make high-resolution maps of the area, showing where the stones were cut and how people in Neolithic times were able to carry the stones such long distances. Mysterious Inca remains. While constructing an irrigation tank in central Ecuador in 2019, workers came across some mysterious artifacts. The workers got quite the shock when they discovered ancient human remains and paused the long-awaited project while a team of archaeologists explored the site. In addition to the skeletons, which date back roughly 500 years, they found a ring and several well-preserved ceramic vessels with unique symbols, including a Christian cross and what looks like the letter W. It looks like the workers had uncovered a cemetery under the field. There hasn't been much money for excavation, so the mayor of the town himself hired archaeologists so they could see what was going on. They discovered a rectangular Inca cancha, an earth and clay mass that served as the foundation of either a home or a fortification, measuring 43 by 23 feet. Usually they are made up of stones, but stones that were likely used in building the cancha are missing, probably because they were repurposed later on for building houses. The team uncovered 12 water-damaged skeletons in shallow 3-foot-deep graves. Their teeth are better preserved, leaving researchers hopeful that they will be able to extract genetic information that will tell them if all the people buried in the cemetery are related or not. While official results are pending, it's believed that the remains and artifacts date back to sometime between 1450 and 1540 AD, during the transition from late Inca culture to Spanish colonialism. While the cemetery itself is located in Inca territory, the ring that was found with one of the skeletons and the ceramics decorated with designs that are not associated with the Inca culture provide more questions than answers. Mebra Skydisk. One of the most mysterious and controversial artifacts of all time is the Mebra Skydisk. It's a beautiful ancient object made of bronze and copper, said to represent the cosmos. It is actually believed to be the oldest ever depiction of the night sky, but now archaeologists are getting into a hot debate as to how old it actually is. It's such an extraordinary piece that it might be too good to be true. Some believe that it dates back to 3,600 years ago during the Bronze Age, which would make it an unprecedented treasure. Other researchers argue that the Mebra Skydisk was crafted over 1,000 years later during the Iron Age. It's actually possible that the artifact got mixed up with an array of Bronze Age items after some looters discovered it in 2002 and reburied it away from its original site. As part of a plea bargain, the looters who stole the artifact revealed that they found it at a German hillside site called Mittelberg. But some believe the criminals lied about this and are keeping the true location of the discovery to themselves in hopes of finding more valuable treasures later when they're free. A paper published by the Austrian Academy of Sciences refutes these claims and accuses the researchers of making false claims and ignoring decades of previous credible research. Written by a team of experts, including the director of the State Museum of Prehistory in Hull, which owns the Mebra Skydisk, it says that where the object was found is perfectly plausible because it would have been an ideal stargazing site. The team also argues that the hillside was an appropriate place for the disk's creators to ceremonially bury it. So then it would be authentic and really, really old. It might seem silly, but artifacts without context only gives you a small glimpse of the story, and archaeologists are pretty passionate people. Sarcophagi of Karahia. Situated into a cliffside high above a river gorge sit 7 large statues overlooking northern Peru's Utcubamba Valley. These statues are actually large 15th century funeral tombs created by the Chachapoya civilization before they were conquered by the Inca. Known to the locals as the ancient wise men, the sarcophagi of Karahia sit nearly 700 feet above the valley floor. The cult of the dead was extremely important, and those at the top of the hierarchy were placed as physically high as possible to be closer to the gods. These sarcophagi are made from grass and clay and were painted white with red and yellow pigment to honor characteristics of those buried inside, usually warriors. The burunmachus found here hold warriors, and the skulls on top are said to be the heads of their enemies. Their remote location has preserved them from destruction and looters, and they constitute some of the few remaining intact pieces representing Chachapoya culture, most of which were destroyed by the conquering Incas. There were originally 8 sarcophagi, but one collapsed during a 1928 earthquake. Each of the human-like constructions stand at about 8.2 feet high. Archaeologists scaled the cliff for the first time during the mid-19th century, only to discover that the sarcophagi are impressively well preserved, but they were sort of forgotten about. More recent explorations have shared these impressive burials again with the world. Inside one, there was a mummy placed in a fetal position and wrapped up in a cocoon of wild stalks and twine, along with animal skin, ceramics, and other grave goods. Very few people have been able to take a close look at these rare artifacts left behind by a long-lost culture. Bet's Mystery Sphere. In 1974, a family's house caught fire in Fort George Island, Florida. The story goes that in the ashes they found a strange metal sphere with an apparent mind of its own in their backyard. It's rumored to be smaller but heavier than a bowling ball, measuring 8 inches in diameter and weighing 22 pounds. At first, the family believed that the item was a cannonball left behind from a war, but the object, nicknamed the Bet's Mystery Sphere, was unusually clean and shiny for an object that old. It also seemed to be made of stainless steel, a material that was not used during that time period. Soon enough, the sphere allegedly began moving around on its own, vibrating and making unexplainable noises. When one family member played the guitar, the ball reacted by making a throbbing noise. Then, while the Betts family rolled the sphere back and forth between each other on the floor, it randomly changed directions and returned to the person who had rolled it. The family's dog also responded strangely to the sphere by crying and covering her ears with her paws. The media went crazy, and the object got everyone's attention, including the military. The U.S. military acquired the ball and performed their own tests on it. In an interview with the St. Petersburg Times, Jerry Betts, the mother of the household, explained that an independent examiner found radio waves and a magnetic field around the ball. A Navy spokesperson, on the other hand, told the newspaper that while they were unable to identify the object, they said it was man-made and harmless. After the sphere became national news, it got to be too much, and the family stopped talking about it altogether. Last I heard, they are no longer taking sphere-related inquiries. Illegal slave ship. 3 years ago, archaeologists working near Sisal, Mexico, discovered the ruins of a sunken ship called La Unión, which ultimately proved to be an illegal slave vessel. It caught fire and went down in 1861 while carrying Maya captives to Cuba. Not long after doing so, was outlawed. It's unknown how many prisoners, along with the dozens of crew and passengers, died in the tragedy. The ship was rediscovered in 2017. Fisherman Juan Diego Esquivel led archaeologists to the site, where they found numerous artifacts in addition to the wreckage, including bottles, ceramics, and brass diningware. At first, they were unable to identify the vessel. They knew that it was built sometime between 1837 and 1860, based on its paddle wheels and boilers. An archive search turned up La Unión as the best possible match. While the ship's official designated purpose was to transport passengers and goods, it also carried illegal human cargo, despite laws that had banned the practice just months earlier. Archaeologist Helena Barba Menegas said in a statement that each slave was sold to middlemen for 25 pesos, and they resold them in Havana for as much as 160 pesos for men and 120 pesos for women. Many Maya captives were taken during the Castle War, a conflict between indigenous people and high-ranking citizens of Spanish descent who were imposing heavy taxes and seizing land from the Maya. Others were promised a better future working in Cuba, only to discover that they had been tricked into slavery. Following the disaster, the Mexican government heightened its efforts to stop human trafficking by performing increased inspections at its ports. Questionable burial. Since the early 1900s, the remains of several Neanderthals have turned up at a cave shelter in southwestern France, at an archaeological site called La Ferracie. The most recent discovery is a child nicknamed La Ferracie 8, who was found between 1970 and 1973. The child was only around 2 years old when they died 41,000 years ago. Archaeologists originally assumed that the skeletons at the site were deliberately laid to rest, but experts ultimately began to question whether Neanderthals buried their dead the same way that Homo sapiens do, especially considering the outdated methods used. In an attempt to gain solid answers about Neanderthals' funerary practices, a team of modern researchers recently re-evaluated the findings related to La Ferracie 8. They discovered that much of the original data was never assessed in the first place, so they reviewed the excavation team's records, analyzed La Ferracie 8's bones, and performed additional excavations at the cave site. The team determined that the remains were in fact intentionally buried. La Ferracie 8's head sat higher than their body at a different incline than that of the land, indicating deliberate placement in the grave. Also, the bones contained no animal-related damage, which is a clear sign that the body was buried shortly after death. The researchers were also unable to come up with an explanation for the bones ending up in the state they were found in. They hope to examine the other 7 skeletons found at the site to see if they too were purposely buried. The Dropa Stones. According to legend, an archaeologist named Dr. Chi Pu Tse discovered 716 extraterrestrial stone discs inside a funerary cave in 1938 while leading an expedition in China's Bayan Har Mountains. Measuring 9 inches in diameter, they were covered in little grooves and hieroglyphics. When played on a record player, the discs supposedly emitted a low-frequency humming sound. The professor reportedly claimed that the discs, known as the Dropa Stones, featured stories of a UFO crash landing near the caves 12,000 years ago. The spacecraft's crew, known as the Dropa aliens, tried to build new lives on Earth but were hunted and killed by locals. When nobody believed the professor's claims, he was forced to resign, and the Dropa Stones haven't been seen since. The archaeologist and professor who allegedly found and studied the stones seems to have disappeared from the face of the Earth, and the only thing remaining of the Dropa Stones are grainy photographs. Perhaps these stones did exist and may not have depicted aliens at all, but perhaps drawings or writings of an ancient people that were misinterpreted. However, it looks like now we will never know. Bizarre ball. While walking his dog in Hammonasset State Park last year, Connecticut resident Bob Kirch found an egg-shaped Native American tool known as a pecked stone sphere. Kirch, a doctor by trade and an ancient artifact enthusiast, spotted the partially buried object among shells and other rocks. He noticed that it seemed different. It seemed too round to be a naturally occurring rock and was about the size of a baseball, so he immediately collected it. A few weeks later, he reported the discovery to state archaeologist Sarah Sportman, who looked into the artifact's authenticity. Sportman said that several ground stone or pecked stone spheres have been found in Connecticut, but they are a mysterious artifact type that is found all over the world and from different time periods. The function of these objects isn't definitively understood and may not be the same in all places. She added that while experts know that the Native Americans who lived in the region used the stone tools before Europeans arrived, the specific time period of their use is unknown. They could be game pieces, tools for bashing open nuts or animal bones, weights, or ritual objects. Similar artifacts found in Israel had fat, collagen, and animal bone traces on them. For now, though, researchers remain unsure of the purpose of the stone ball found by Kirch and others discovered throughout Connecticut, which are smoother than the ones studied in Israel. What do you think they were for? Let me know in the comments below. Bronze Matrix of Sarcophagi. In 2013, a storm uprooted a tree at an archaeological site in Romania that was once the legendary capital of the Dacians. Archaeologists were thrilled at what they found in the roots, a real treasure and perfect artifact to represent the ancient Dacian Empire, a bronze matrix covered with carvings of real and mythological creatures like griffins, lions, bulls, elephants, and leopards. Now known as the bronze matrix of Sarmizegetusa, it is actually a mold from ancient times used to create decorative pieces from precious metals. Dating back over 2,000 years, it weighs around 18 pounds and is 2 inches thick. The hexagon is the only one of its kind ever found in Europe and came from a jeweler's workshop from the 1st century BC. Archaeologist Dr. Gelu Floria says that the site of Sarmizegetusa was a cosmopolitan environment in which elites from the Dacian kingdom were able to purchase products and services of high quality before they were conquered by the Romans. The fact that it was found in the Dacian capital and the type of artwork it represents shows that the Dacians were well connected to the rest of the Mediterranean and shows off the artistic and technological capabilities of the ancient empire. Very little is known about these people before the Roman conquest. What we do know is they were well known for their iron and gold mines and gold mining techniques, so it was only a matter of time that the Roman Empire would come to swallow them up. This matrix is now displayed alone at the Dacian and Roman Civilization Museum of Deva, Romania, so people can appreciate the detail and beauty on all of its facets, and it is now considered one of the most valuable archaeological artifacts of Romania. An ancient blessing. The Israel Antiquities Authority recently announced the discovery of a 1,500-year-old tablet bearing a Christian blessing in Greek. Discovered in what is now Taiba, the slab was once part of a lintel, the horizontal support that sits at the top of a door frame that sat atop a church entrance. Researcher Leah de Signy translated the inscription, which reads, "Christ born of Mary." This work of the most God-fearing and pious bishop Theodosius and the miserable Thomas was built from the foundation. Whoever enters should pray for them. De Segni explained that the opening line, "Christ born of Mary," was a commonly used phrase at the time, and that it was likely meant to protect the reader from evil forces. The inscription also mentioned the building's founder, Theodosius, an archbishop who had religious authority in the region. Evidence shows that at some point the lintel was repurposed as a brick. It was now found incorporated into the walls, therefore we know that the stone was reused as construction material. Likely the building collapsed and was rebuilt, IA archaeologist Yardena Alexander told the Jerusalem Post. Built during the late 15th century, the newly discovered church likely dates back to the Byzantine era, a time when the town was a Christian village. Besides the tablet, archaeologists found floor mosaics arranged in geometric designs. Predatory giant worms. Turns out there may be something to the legendary Mongolian death worm. A large, ambush predatory worm measuring up to 6.5 feet long once roamed the earth, although these guys slithered along the sea floor near modern-day Taiwan and weren't lurking in the desert. Scientists were able to find this worm based on a trace fossil of the creature's burrow found in a rocky area near the Taiwanese coast. Measuring 2 to 3 centimeters in diameter, the fossil, dubbed Penicnus formosae, was considerably larger than the trace fossils of other creatures, according to Yu Yan Pan, the lead author of a newly published study, who further explained that the fossil's distinctive feather-like structures around the upper burrow were also unique, and no previously studied trace fossil has shown similar features. A high iron concentration around the upper burrow indicates that the alarmingly huge worm secreted mucus to maintain its burrow after feeding. Evidence of prehistoric marine predatory worms is hard to find because their soft bodies decomposed quickly and left little behind in the way of fossils. As the first known trace fossil created by a subsurface ambush predator, Penicnus formosae provides scientists with a rare chance to study the behavior of these creatures. Stolen painting recovered. It's not every day that stolen art reappears, but it's extremely rare for authorities to recover something that they didn't even know was missing. But that's exactly what happened recently when Italian police recovered a 16th century copy of Leonardo da Vinci's Salvator Mundi. It was stolen from the Doma Museum collection at the San Domenico Maggiore Church in Naples sometime last year. Because the museum was closed due to COVID-19, nobody noticed the painting was gone. Known as the world's most expensive painting, the Salvator Mundi shows Jesus raising his right hand in a blessing and holding a crystal orb in his left hand. The original sold for $450.3 million in 2017, despite some experts doubting its authenticity, and it has not been publicly displayed since. Police found the copy that was stolen, which experts believe Da Vinci's student Giacomo Alibrandi may have painted during the 1510s while searching an apartment in Naples. They arrested the flat's 36-year-old owner on suspicion of receiving stolen goods. Authorities did not disclose when the painting was stolen, but records show that it was in the museum's possession as recently as January of last year. The Guardian reported that the church was unaware of the painting's disappearance, according to Naples prosecutor Giovanni Melillo, who said that the police are investigating the theft, which oddly left no signs of a break-in. He suspects that the job was done by professionals, possibly as part of an international black market art ring. Ancient jewelry. While excavating in anticipation of a planned highway construction project in Raleigh, North Carolina, a team of archaeologists led by Matt Wilkerson from the state's Department of Transportation found over 155 archaeological sites, including a hunter-gatherer camp that they believe was used for a long period of time, based on the array of artifacts it contained. Included among the items were tools and pot fragments dating back to 500 AD. Researchers hope that a chemical analysis will reveal what foods were prepared in the vessel. Artifacts found in deeper layers at the site date back much further. The team uncovered stone points that originated sometime between 8000 and 6000 BC during the Archaic period, along with an equally old polished stone with holes in it that may have been worn as jewelry. The nomadic people who used the camp represent the earliest inhabitants of what is now North Carolina, and their mobile lifestyle is reflected in the objects found at the site, which include tools made from stone sourced from mountains roughly 100 miles away. The artifacts are now the property of the North Carolina Office of State Archaeology. Where they will ultimately end up is unknown. Earlyest starfish. University of Cambridge researchers recently published a study describing a remarkably well-preserved fossil of the earliest starfish-like animal. It was found in Morocco's Anti-Atlas Mountains. Named Cantabrigiaster phezoataensis, the fossil is helping scientists trace the evolutionary history of all modern-day starfish and brittle stars, and experts believe it may also be related to sea lilies. As an ancestor of both, C. phezoataensis is shaped like a star but lacks distinctive features of the starfish and brittle stars of today. It lived around 480 million years ago during the early Ordovician period on Gondwana, an ancient supercontinent that broke up around 180 million years ago into the continents that exist today. The species shared its ancient cold water reef habitat with alien-looking creatures like giant filter feeders called anomalocaridids, which looked like a bizarre hybrid of a shrimp and a squid. C. phezoataensis looked far less strange than the animals it lived alongside. It had a jaw and was therefore not a filter feeder like some modern-day brittle stars, but scientists do not know what it ate. It first appeared during the Great Ordovician Biodiversification Event, the most significant period of increasing marine biodiversity that ever occurred. Today's starfish, brittle stars, and sea lilies constitute 3 of 5 known groups of related creatures called echinoderms, which also include sea cucumbers and sea urchins. Experts admit that more research is necessary to determine the exact connections between the first starfish and those that exist today. New giant prehistoric insect species. Scientists have discovered a new ancient assassin insect genus and species based on a pristinely preserved fossil that was discovered in the Green River Formation in Colorado. A new report describes the creature whose physical characteristics are visible in astonishingly clear detail, despite the fossil being over 50 million years old. It was found in 2 pieces, split almost perfectly down the middle. 2 different people each bought a piece from a fossil dealer. For the study, researchers tracked down the 2 pieces like the twins from The Parent Trap and examined them together. They realized that the insect's genital organ, called a pygophore, had been broken in 2. By getting a clear look at the pygophore, which is roughly the size of a grain of rice, they realized that the specimen constituted a new species. Daniel Swanson, who led the research with paleontologist Sam Heads, explained in a statement that inspecting insects' genitalia is a good way to identify new species. But these body parts are often obscured in fossils, making the newly identified insect a rare example. Normally, we only get this level of detail in species that are living today, Swanson said. The predatory bug came from a group of banded assassin insects, which is about 25 million years older than the researchers originally thought. Oldest 3D Chinese art. Last year, archaeologists published a study describing the oldest known example of 3-dimensional East Asian artwork in Henan, China. Originally found in a pile of rubbish in 1958 and rediscovered in 2005, the figurine was carved from blackened bone. It depicts a Paleolithic bird, and radiocarbon testing dates it back to roughly 13,500 years ago. According to ArtNet News, the discovery indicates that art rose independently in China from other parts of the world and is a game changer when it comes to changing experts' understanding of ancient Chinese civilization. The carving predates other similar artifacts in the region by at least 8,500 years, and it sets apart the artistic practices of East Asian late Pleistocene cultures from those of Siberia and Western Europe. Study authors said, "We were definitely struck by this technological feat and by the beauty of the object." One thing that stands out for archaeologists is the realization that the culture who created the object valued symbolic thought and expression, that they were not solely concerned with survival. The ability to do this contributes greatly to the development of culture. The figurine was found amongst a plethora of other important Paleolithic artifacts, including stone tools and pottery shards. It was made using a complex, low-temperature heating technique and displays stylistic qualities that, in the words of study co-author Francesco De Rico, identify an original artistic tradition, unknown until now. Fossilized dinosaur and babies. Researchers recently revealed that they found the first ever fossilized evidence of a dinosaur sitting on its nest of unborn babies. Discovered in southern China, the 70-million-year-old Oviraptorosaur specimen consists of an incomplete adult skeleton and a clutch of 24 eggs, at least 7 of which contain preserved embryos. This discovery has been declared the rarest of the rare in dinosaurs. Dr. Matt Lemana of the Carnegie Museum said that it is the first time that embryos have been discovered in the eggs along with their mother. The babies were almost ready to hatch, which tells us beyond a doubt that this oviraptorid had tended its nest for quite a long time. This dinosaur was a caring parent that ultimately gave its life while nurturing its young. Oviraptorosaurs were a group of bird-like theropod dinosaurs that thrived during the Cretaceous period, the third and final chapter of the Mesozoic era, which lasted from 145 to 66 million years ago, when the dinosaurs were wiped off the face of the Earth. Structure made from mammoth bones. Early last year, a team of scientists unearthed a 25,000-year-old structure made from the bones of over 60 woolly mammoths at the Kostenki archaeological site in Russia, located roughly 300 miles south of Moscow. They published their findings in the journal Antiquity, describing the 40-foot-wide circular structure as having several walls, fire pits, and areas designated for butchering. The sheer number of bones that our Paleolithic ancestors had sourced from somewhere and brought to this particular location to build this monument is really quite staggering, archaeologist Alexander Pryor told the New York Times. 2 other similar structures were unearthed at Kostenki during the 1950s and 60s, and over 70 have been found throughout Europe altogether. The oldest among them are thought to be at least a few thousand years younger than the recently discovered mammoth bone structure at Kostenki, and most of these curious constructions are much smaller, measuring just 10 feet wide. Some researchers believe they were used for protection from the elements during the Ice Age, but the truth is that they are still trying to determine what the structures were used for, especially the newly found one, which constitutes the oldest and largest among them. Clearly, a lot of time and effort went to building this structure, so it was obviously important to the people that made it for some reason, Pryor said. He is unsure whether it was built for ritualistic reasons and thinks that this is possible, but that sustenance activities would have also played a role. Based on the lack of animal remains surrounding the huge Kostenki bone circle, which have commonly been found alongside other such structures, he conceded that it may not have been used for living in or storing food, leaving ritualistic purposes as one of the few remaining reasons it may have existed. Creature from the deep. On a beach in Namibia, a bizarre creature roughly 20 feet long washed ashore, and ever since this strange creature was discovered and photographed, people all over the world have been speculating as to what kind of animal it could have been. The creature was discovered by scientists from the Namibian Dolphin Project as they wandered along Sandwich Harbor in Dorob National Park. They noticed something unusual high up on the beach and went to investigate. Upon closer inspection, the group thought that it looked kind of like a whale, but its body was flat and it didn't appear to have any bones. Luckily, the scientists were able to collect samples from the rotting carcass and determine the creature's true origins. It turned out that it did have a skull, and this allowed them to figure out that the sea monster was actually a deep-diving whale known as the Cuvier's beaked whale. These types of whales can grow to be about 23 feet long, and these whales hold the record for the deepest and longest dive of any mammal. It was such a big surprise because these creatures aren't seen very often. The last one spotted in Namibia was nearly 20 years ago. How it got flattened is anyone's guess, but it probably had something to do with an advanced state of decomposition. Unfortunately, the researchers were unable to properly determine the cause of death or what the animal had been eating prior to it washing up on the beach. Scientists will use the samples collected from the corpse to study the animal further. Mini Nessie. A man in Georgia recently stumbled upon a miniature Loch Ness monster. It happened on a Friday afternoon while he and his son were spending their day at the Wolf Island National Wildlife Refuge. While strolling down the beach, they first thought they had stumbled upon a dead seal. But getting a closer look, they realized that they had a mini Loch Ness monster on their hands. The creature in question was about 5 feet long, had a long and skinny neck, and it even appeared to have flippers just like the real Nessie. Even its head looked oddly familiar. According to residents from the area, this discovery wasn't a surprise. Local legends whisper a creature much like the Loch Ness monster lives in the region, except its name is actually Altamaha Ha, or Alti for short. Alti is rumored to be a hissing sea serpent that lives near the mouth of the Altamaha River in southeastern Georgia. The legend comes from the Muskogee Creek tribe and has reportedly been seen roaming through the streams and basking on the shore. More recent sightings claim it's about 70 feet long with the thickness of a barrel, the body of a serpent, and the head of an alligator. From the 1920s to today, there have been numerous sightings of a long creature between 10 and 20 feet long that has been lurking in the water. The nearby city of Darien even uses a plesiosaur, which is an ancient marine reptile from millions of years ago that looks a lot like Nessie, in its city logo. But what does this discovery mean exactly? Are there prehistoric monsters breeding in Georgia? Is there a whole platoon of Loch Ness monsters hiding just off the beach? Well, maybe not. According to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, many fish resemble prehistoric monsters when they begin to decompose. This monster could have just been a fish, although its remains have yet to be identified. Spined sea freak. Ocracoke is a small island about 18 miles from the coast of North Carolina. Families come here to relax and get away from the hustle and bustle. It's also a place where monsters wash up on the beach. A local resident was taking a walk on the beach when she stumbled upon a large freak of a fish covered in what can only be described as prehistoric scales. It looked like something right out of the Jurassic period. After the resident snapped some photos and put them online, asking for help in identifying the weird sea creature, several professionals came forward and said that it was not actually a sea monster at all, but a giant Atlantic sturgeon. This is quite interesting because Atlantic sturgeon are actually considered to be living fossils. Those bony plates on their backs are actually the same thing that turtles have on their shells. They are known as scutes and they have been around for millions of years. What makes sturgeons even more like sea monsters is that they have a tail that resembles a shark and whisker barbels hanging from their mouths like a catfish. It's no surprise that when these giant things wash up on shore, people immediately start screaming sea monster. After all, the Atlantic sturgeon can grow to be 16 feet long and weigh 800 pounds. Fierce skull. In 2015, a large, mysterious skull was found on a beach in San Francisco, and researchers are scratching their heads over what kind of giant sea monster it could possibly belong to. It almost resembles a dog with huge canine teeth, but it reportedly measured over 10 feet long and 8 feet tall. This seems a little far-fetched, as that would be a massive dog. What makes this thing even stranger is that based on the size of the skull, estimates place the creature at potentially 40 or 50 feet long. But the question is if this even is a skull. It looks more like some sort of deep-sea anglerfish, and perhaps is the whole creature itself, although many are wondering if it is even real in the first place. Reports of this weird thing were scarce, but questionable news sources said that a researcher named Anthony Moore said that this was not a prehistoric skull that washed ashore, but a creature that most likely died within the last 2 years of its discovery, but there is no definitive proof as to its origins. The skull does not match with anything currently recognized by scientists. While it seems to have enormous canine teeth, nothing like it has washed up since, and it's hard to say if this single incident was a hoax or indeed a real-life monster residing somewhere beneath the waves. Could it have been the only one of its kind? What do you think it is? Or do you know any more information about it? Let us all know in the comments below. Mysterious English monster. At Merseyside Beach in Liverpool, UK, locals are shocked and confused after a sea creature washed up on the sand. The creature measured about 15 feet in length and was covered in fur and had flippers. It was found swarmed in flies, mostly decomposed, and giving off a pretty horrendous stench. One eyewitness called it a mishmash of different things in one. And yes, that's pretty accurate. At first glance, it might look like a weird bloated underwater horse, but if you look at it from another angle, it kind of looks like a dead whale. Whatever it was, it definitely freaked out the locals. The animal was eventually confirmed to be a type of unidentified whale that was in an advanced state of rot when it showed up on the beach. The Ainsdale Sand Dunes National Nature Reserve then went to work to remove the animal's remains as quickly and as efficiently as possible. It didn't turn out to be a sea monster in the end, but those who showed up to the beach that day got a little bit more than they were bargaining for. Slimey Sea Thing. Something slimy washed up on a Mexican beach, and it gave sunbathers the shock of a lifetime. Out of all the horrifying things I've shown you, this might be the most unsettling. It was found in Mazatlan by a woman who at first glance thought it was a large piece of rope, but when she got closer, she saw it was actually a sea monster with a mouthful of fangs and dead eyes that seemed to stare straight into her soul. She immediately snapped some photos of the mysterious creature and uploaded them to social media, looking for an answer as to what kind of horrendous beast was invading her stretch of beach. The pictures went viral, and nobody could believe that such a freakish thing had slimed its way out of the deep ocean. Some thought it was an eel or a sea snake, but some people believed it had come from outer space. And while the creature never was truly identified, one of the best theories of all is that the creature was actually a deep-sea lizardfish. These kinds of fish are found in tropical areas across the world and usually hang out at the very bottom near the seabed. These two animals definitely look similar, but unfortunately we'll never know for sure since the body decomposed before any samples could be taken. Alien sea creature. A bizarre creature that resembled an alien without its spaceship found its way onto a beach in Western Australia, baffling local revelers. Pictures of the extraterrestrial surfaced on Reddit and were quickly spread around the internet. People were immediately shocked, mainly because the animal didn't look like anything that belonged on Earth. It looked like it had a spongy white brain at the top of its mass, with what almost looked like white and black tentacles around its body, like a strange hybrid between a jellyfish and an octopus. The public was stunned for a little while until it was determined the alien monster was actually just a striped anemone. These weird animals grow in the tropical waters mainly near Australia, but the reason this one was so confusing is that anemones usually have more color. This one probably got bleached by the sun, and that's why it looks so odd. These creatures are extremely venomous and can severely hurt anyone that touches them. If you find yourself on a beach in Australia and you see something that looks like it came from another galaxy, don't touch it. Fanged Dolphin. Dolphins are often seen as cute and friendly sea creatures, but when locals in Mexico found a strange creature on the beach, there was no way it could be a dolphin. It had the head of a dolphin, the teeth of something from a nightmare, and the body of a large gray snake. It had no flippers, making people seriously question what exactly it was. To make things even stranger, the animal had no eyes. There was no official or expert there to be able to identify it, and locals believed that since it had such a strange appearance, the unusual creature probably came from the deepest depths of the ocean, where there is no light, and many of the creatures don't need eyes to see. Fishermen reported that they had never seen anything like it. Based on the photographs, it seems like it could have been a young dolphin that had not fully developed, or perhaps an eel that died and later swelled up. Officially, the creature was never identified. What do you think it is? Let me know in the comments below. Megamouth in the Philippines. The Philippines is a hotspot for frightening and mysterious sea monsters, and a fisherman got the shock of a lifetime when he found a strange bloated creature on shore with an enormous head and face. It was a rare megamouth shark. The real curiosity was that according to professional marine biologist Christopher Bird, less than 70 megamouth sharks have ever been spotted. That makes it an incredibly rare find. Preliminary investigation showed that the shark was male, 15 feet long, and most certainly dead upon arrival. However, no one is sure how it died. Fishermen used a stretcher to carry the shark and bring it closer so scientists could take a look at it. The Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources in Albay Province will investigate the cause of the shark's death. Very little is known about megamouth sharks, as the species was only discovered in 1976 and it lives in the deep ocean. What we do know is that they are very recognizable since they are so strange looking, and they aren't very good swimmers. They can grow pretty large, about 18 feet long. One accidentally captured in fishing nets in 1983 was 14.6 feet long and weighed 1,652 pounds. Scientists were able to get tissue samples for further research. Deep sea fish. A whole menagerie of deep sea monsters washed ashore at the same place and at the same time. Conservation volunteers were stunned when they found a fanged tooth and a viperfish on a beach in the St. Cyrus National Nature Reserve south of Aberdeen in Scotland. While one of these fish would have been shocking to find, the fact that there were several of them was even more surprising. The large black fangtooth was especially impressive. According to a report from the BBC, the fish were gathered up and shown to the park manager. Everyone was bewildered, as these types of fish live only in the deepest parts of the ocean, where there's little light and few other creatures. Nobody could figure out how they washed up on the beach. It was later discovered that a deep-sea fish researcher had caught the animals and took them home to show his children on a trip. When he returned them to the ocean, the tide washed them back to shore where the volunteers found them. Mystery solved. Dueling dinosaurs. Fossil hunters in 2006 hit the bony jackpot in Montana when they unearthed the bones of two enormous dinosaurs locked together in battle, frozen in time. The Tyrannosaurus rex and Triceratops were completely entangled in a 67-million-year-old fossil. The big mystery here was that paleontologists had no idea how both dinosaurs ended up buried together when they had apparently been fighting. Scientists from all over the world wanted the chance to examine the fossils, but they were locked away out of reach. After 14 years in court battles, auctions, and in negotiations, finally the giant fossil of the dueling dinos has been transported to the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. According to a recent report from Smithsonian Magazine, paleontologists are now working tirelessly to uncover the mystery of this ancient battle of the titans. The dueling dinosaurs is one of the most remarkable fossil discoveries ever made, Scott Sampson, a paleontologist and the president of Science World, a nonprofit education and research facility in Vancouver, told Smithsonian. That's because it not only captures two of the most famous dinosaurs in the world, but it actually shows ancient behavior stuck in a rock. People have been digging for dinosaurs for years, but no one has found anything like this. The two dinosaurs are extremely well preserved, with the bones still partially encased in rock, allowing scientists to study impressions left behind by their skin. In the meantime, they are also trying to figure out how these two enormous creatures both met their untimely end together. The mushroom sword. A man was hunting for mushrooms in a rural forest in the Czech Republic and stumbled upon something quite strange. Instead of finding the delicious mushrooms he was searching for, he stumbled across an ancient sword and a bronze axe. The mushroom hunter first spotted a piece of metal jutting out from the ground. After a bit of kicking, it turned out to be a sword, and then he got on his hands and knees and began to dig, quickly discovering a bronze axe as well. The man reported his findings to local archaeologists, who then planned a formal excavation. Turns out that they weren't left behind by some random hunters, but by a warrior over 3,000 years ago. What's really mysterious about this discovery is that the ancient sword is intricately decorated with engraved circles and other strange markings. Another baffling thing is that the location of the weapons is nowhere near any known prehistoric settlement. What exactly they were doing there is anybody's guess. All that researchers know right now is that the artifacts originated in the Bronze Age, and they could have come from what is now Sweden. The bronze axe was not as extraordinary, and it could have come from local production, but the sword was way too intricate to have been made anywhere near where it was found. This suggests that it could have been a wayward warrior moving through the forest when disaster struck. The researchers have yet to find any bones in the area, but investigations are still ongoing. Have you ever found something you weren't exactly looking for? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. We'd love to have you! Ancient carved stones. Just recently, archaeologists have uncovered 9 mysterious stone objects scattered around an equally mysterious hearth on the mainland of Orkney, part of an island archipelago off the coast of Scotland. It's an area with very few people and an ancient history. They figure that the stones date back to at least 4,000 years ago, but what makes them so enigmatic is that they resemble human figures. The carved stones have large bodies, very distinct necks, and they even have heads. Each one stands about 1.6 feet tall, and they were discovered near a sort of ancient burial structure. The figures were almost missed, as they were found at a location that had been designated for an electrical substation, a completely accidental discovery. It's unclear what the purpose of the building and the stones were. In fact, everything about this discovery is currently unclear. The figures could have been used as standing stones in ancient rituals, but nobody really knows. They also could have just been pillars used to hold up the roof of an ancient building. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Missing heads. In a Roman cemetery, yet another mysterious cache of skeletons has been found. The Roman cemetery is located in England, close to Suffolk, and has archaeologists scratching their heads. The reason for this is because roughly 40% of the people buried in the graveyard were found missing their heads. Out of the 52 skeletons discovered, 17 had been decapitated, but their heads weren't thrown into a pit or something. Instead, they had been placed to rest between the legs of their owner. Nobody has any idea why the decapitations occurred or why on earth the heads were placed between the legs. It wasn't done savagely, as all the graves were discovered in pretty good condition and very well organized. According to one of the archaeologists working on the project, it could have been a very important funeral rite associated with a special group within the local population. This means it could have been a unique type of burial by a possibly unknown group of people who had existed during the time that Rome ruled England. To make this puzzle even stranger, the bodies had not been decapitated in the traditional executioner fashion. Rather than being lopped off at the neck, they were expertly severed just below the skull and placed meticulously between the feet. Also, the 17 headless bodies were the only bodies buried lying on their backs in the standard position. The others were buried face down in a crouched position, which could suggest deviant burials. And to top it all off, 4 of the decapitated skulls were placed with skeletons that they didn't physically belong to. It's not clear what went down here, but it is pretty unsettling. Priest mummies. In Egypt, the Ministry of Antiquities has announced that archaeologists have unearthed 30 perfectly preserved coffins with mummies inside. While you might think that mummies are found all the time in Egypt, the sheer quantity and their incredible well-preserved state makes them amazingly special. Discovered at an ancient necropolis near Luxor, the coffins and mummies date back about 3,000 years. The coffins still have much of their color, with Egyptian deities and hieroglyphics still discernible on the old wood. According to the Egyptian Minister of Antiquities, the mummies consisted of 23 adult males, 5 adult females, and 2 children. They were arranged in 2 layers with 12 on the bottom and 18 on top. Archaeologists are working on deciphering the hieroglyphic writing and analyzing the coffins and mummies to try to find out who these people were and why they were all buried together. The best guess at this time suggests that they were priests buried with their families. The oldest human skull. A new study is blowing everything historians believed out of the water. In the 1970s, there were 2 fossilized skulls discovered in southern Greece. At the time, researchers were pretty confused by the remains. They were mostly incomplete and found without any kind of context. This means that they weren't found with any stone tools or other clues that could say who they were or what they were doing there. Researchers assumed that they were Neanderthals, and the case was closed. But now, a bombshell study has been published in the journal Nature that claims one of the skulls found in the 1970s belonged to an early modern Homo sapien that lived 210,000 years ago. People in the scientific community have lost their minds over this unbelievable study because if the conclusions of the study are correct, the skull would be the oldest human fossil in Europe by over 160,000 years. Both skulls are being held at the University of Athens Museum of Anthropology. They have been sitting there for 40 years, but it wasn't until recently that a team of researchers was able to use the newest technology to re-examine them. CT scans and 3D reconstructions were done to get a better look at the skulls. Apparently, one of the fossils lacks a distinctive bulge at the rear of the skull that is a known characteristic of Neanderthals. This has led the research team to believe humans inhabited Europe over 200,000 years ago. While that may seem shocking, it could actually just be that a small group of Homo sapiens left Africa and then died out before being able to set up a permanent culture in Europe. Baffling stone carvings. Jerusalem has countless mysterious discoveries, but now included among them are some strange carvings that have been uncovered in an excavation beneath the city, and archaeologists don't know what they are. Diggers from Israel have found a complex of rooms carved into the bedrock of one of the oldest sections of the city. Within the complex of rooms, they discovered several V shapes cut into the limestone floor about 2 inches deep next to each other. Other than these strange carvings, there were no other clues. Nobody knows who made the carvings or what they were made for. While at first it may seem like an accident, typically people don't carve extremely deep symbols into the floor without a reason. It's estimated that the carvings are at least 3,000 years old. One of the directors of the dig, Eli Shukran, said the markings are very strange and very intriguing. I've never seen anything like them. We know so little that we have been unable even to posit a theory about their nature. What do you think these symbols mean? Let me know in the comments below. New evidence of Pontius Pilate. If you're familiar with Pontius Pilate, you will know that in the New Testament, he was the man who presided over the trial of Jesus under the Emperor Tiberius. He was the Roman governor of Judea between 37 and 26 BC. It is believed that he was reluctant to sentence Jesus to death, and several branches of the church believe that he became a Christian himself. A recent study of coins found beneath Pilgrimage Road, which used to lead from the Siloam Pool to the Temple Mount, show that it was built under the rule of Pilate. Archaeologist Donald Ariel is a coin expert who works with the Israel Antiquities Authority, and he says that based on archaeological evidence, the man who sentenced Jesus to death may have gone out of his way to create a comfortable road for Jewish pilgrims. The life and times of Pilate are still quite controversial, but as with everything, nothing is ever black and white. Mysterious ancient warrior. In 2019, archaeologists made one of the most significant finds in the United Kingdom, an ancient Celtic warrior buried in a chariot with weapons and ponies. Dating back 2,000 years, included in the burial was a shield, which Dr. Melanie Giles of the University of Manchester calls the most important British Celtic art object of the millennium. The design feature is completely unique and not similar to any other Iron Age finds across Europe. This crucial discovery was found in East Yorkshire, and it's the only burial ever in the UK where archaeologists have discovered horses entombed in a chariot grave. The man was positioned in the chariot behind the horses, which were placed to look like they were leaping out of the grave. This burial demonstrates the importance of chariots to people of the Iron Age, but the magnitude and well-preserved state of this find makes it incomparable. The mysterious man is an enigma. He died somewhere between 320 BC and 174 BC, but nobody knows who he was, what family he belonged to, or just who exactly left him buried in such a grandiose way. Humans in the Americas? New finds from Mexico have uncovered evidence that people were living in the Americas 33,000 years ago. The results are based on archaeological discoveries recently found at Chiquihuite Cave in central Mexico. Researchers discovered roughly 2,000 stone tools, which suggests the cave had been used by people for at least a span of 20,000 years. The reason this is such an incredible discovery is because we have long believed that nobody lived in North America until the ending of the last ice age, roughly 11,000 years ago. Our ancestors would have crossed the land bridge between Siberia and Alaska, then wandered south and slowly populated the Americas. This new evidence would place people on the continent 20,000 years earlier, at least. The results of the extensive study have been published in the journal Nature and reported by the BBC. But even with all the reporting and all the investigating going on, there is still no consensus on how people were living in central Mexico that long ago. It's one of the most important discoveries of recent times, and it happened in 2020. Thanks for watching! Which of these incredible discoveries did you find the most fascinating? Let me know in the comments below. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye!